My sister banned me from her royal wedding to a billionaire heir, so I pulled up in a $2 million Lamborghini and exposed the family secret that brought down her entire engagement. What started as petty sibling rivalry ended with international headlines, a broken engagement worth $500 million, and me inheriting everything she thought was hers. Before we dive back in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button. I've got something really special lined up for tomorrow. I'm Anastasia Carmichael, 29, and I need to tell you about the most epic family meltdown in modern history. My older sister Genevieve, 32, was about to marry Prince Maximilian Rothenberg of Luxembourg, in what the media called the wedding of the century. But she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the quiet sister she'd spent a lifetime trying to destroy. Let me paint a picture of our family dynamics. The Carmichaels have old money, like Mayflower passenger manifest old money. Our great-great-grandfather founded Carmichael Industries, which became one of the largest shipping empires on the East Coast. By the time Genevieve and I were born, we were worth about $800 million, with properties in the Hamptons, Monaco, and a private island off the coast of Maine. But here's the thing about old money families. There's always a hierarchy, and Genevieve made sure she was at the top from day one. She's what you'd call classically beautiful. Tall, blonde, with the kind of effortless elegance that gets you on magazine covers. I'm shorter, darker, and spent most of my childhood being called the smart one, while she was the pretty one. Our parents, Reginald and Cordelia Carmichael, ran their family like a business. Genevieve was groomed to be the social butterfly who would marry well and expand the family's influence. I was expected to be the behind-the-scenes brain who would manage the family's investments and foundations. It sounds like a reasonable division of labor until you realize that Genevieve got all the attention, praise, and opportunities, while I got the responsibilities and expectations. Growing up in our Newport mansion, Genevieve had her own wing with a walk-in closet bigger than most people's bedrooms. I had a normal-sized room next to the library, which everyone said was perfect for me since I loved reading. When she turned 16, she got a pink Mercedes convertible. When I turned 16, I got a lecture about fiscal responsibility and a used Toyota Camry. The pattern continued through our elite boarding school years at Rosewood Academy in Connecticut. Genevieve was student body president, head of the social committee, and dated the son of a senator. I was valedictorian, captain of the debate team, and had exactly 3 friends who were also academic overachievers. College was where things really diverged. Genevieve went to Vassar to study art history, which basically meant attending parties with other wealthy socialites while occasionally writing papers about Renaissance painters. I went to Wharton for finance and economics, graduating summa cum laude, while she barely scraped by with gentlemen's C's. After graduation, the family dynamic became even more toxic. Genevieve moved back to the family estate and spent her days shopping, attending charity galas, and dating a succession of wealthy men who our parents approved of. Meanwhile, I was working 16-hour days managing the family's investment portfolio and running our charitable foundation. Here's what really burned me. I increased our family's wealth by $200 million over 5 years through strategic investments and business acquisitions. Genevieve's contribution was getting her picture in society magazines and maintaining what our mother called the family's social standing. But every family gathering, every board meeting, every public appearance, Genevieve was front and center while I was relegated to the background. When Forbes did a feature on America's most influential young philanthropists, they interviewed Genevieve, even though I was the one who had restructured our entire charitable giving strategy. The breaking point should have been when I discovered she had been embezzling money from our family foundation to fund her lavish lifestyle. I found receipts for a $50,000 shopping spree in Paris charged to our children's education charity. When I confronted our parents, they swept it under the rug and made me rewrite the financial reports to cover for her. That's when I realized I needed my own money, separate from the family fortune. Using my financial expertise and connections I'd made through legitimate business dealings, I started my own investment firm, Meridian Capital. Within 2 years, I had built a client base of tech entrepreneurs and cryptocurrency millionaires. My personal net worth hit $50 million by age 27. But I kept this success quiet. I still lived in my childhood room when I visited the family estate, still drove my modest BMW, still wore understated clothes to family events. I had learned the art of being underestimated, and it served me well. Then came Prince Maximilian. Max, as he insisted everyone call him, was heir to one of Europe's oldest royal families. The Rothenbergs weren't just wealthy, they owned castles, had their own postal system, and controlled mining rights across 3 countries. Max himself was worth an estimated $2 billion, with investments in everything from luxury hotels to space exploration companies. Genevieve met him at a charity auction in Monte Carlo. Within 6 months, they were engaged. The ring alone was worth $3 million, a flawless 15-carat pink diamond surrounded by smaller white diamonds, custom designed by Cartier.
Our parents were ecstatic. This was the ultimate validation of their strategy. Their beautiful daughter had landed the ultimate prize. The wedding was planned for the Rothenberg family castle in Luxembourg, with 500 guests, including heads of state, Hollywood celebrities, and business titans. But here is where Genevieve's true nature revealed itself. Instead of being grateful for her incredible fortune, she became obsessed with ensuring that nothing could overshadow her moment. And in her mind, that meant eliminating any potential competition from me. It started with small slights. I wasn't included in the engagement party planning. My input on the wedding preparations was ignored. When photographers came to do family portraits for the engagement announcement, I was conveniently needed elsewhere for most of the shoot. Then came the dress code restrictions. Genevieve sent me a 3-page document outlining what I could and couldn't wear to various wedding events. No white, no cream, no ivory, no champagne, no pale pink, no silver, no gold accents. Essentially, I was restricted to dark colors that would ensure I faded into the background. The final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was in my New York office when I received a call from my mother. Genevieve had decided that my presence at the wedding would be distracting because some of the guests knew about my business success and might ask me questions that would take attention away from her big day. I was being uninvited from my own sister's wedding. My mother's exact words were, "Darling, you understand. This is Genevieve's moment, and we can't have anything take away from that. You'll watch the live stream from home, and we'll have a private family celebration later." I hung up the phone and sat in my office overlooking Manhattan, watching the sunset over the city I had conquered, while my family tried to erase me from their most important moment. That's when I realized something crucial. I had spent my entire life playing by their rules, accepting their limitations, and allowing them to diminish my achievements. But I had something they didn't know about: real power, real money, and real connections that existed completely outside their social circle. Genevieve thought she had won by marrying a prince. She had no idea that the quiet sister she'd spent a lifetime overlooking was about to remind everyone exactly who the real powerhouse in the Carmichael family was. The wedding was in 10 days. I had exactly 240 hours to plan the most spectacular revenge in socialite history, and I knew exactly where to start. This one took us ages to get right, so if you're loving it, hitting subscribe would honestly mean the world to us. Okay, back to business. The morning of Genevieve's wedding, I woke up in my penthouse suite at the Hotel de la Paix in Luxembourg City, 3 miles from the Rothenberg family castle where my sister was about to marry her prince. But instead of watching from home like a good little rejected sister, I had spent the past 10 days orchestrating what would become known as the most spectacular wedding crash in European history. My first call was to Dmitry Volkov, a Russian oligarch's son who owed me a favor after I'd helped him acquire a tech startup in Silicon Valley. I said, "Dmitry, my dear, remember that Lamborghini Centenario you bought at auction? The yellow one, worth $2.3 million? I need to borrow it for the day. Dmitri, my dear, his accent was thick with amusement. You finally ready to live a little? Take it, but I want pictures. The Centenario was a work of art, one of only 40 ever made with a naturally aspirated V12 engine that could hit 217 miles per hour. More importantly, it was impossible to ignore. The car was currently housed in Dimitri's private garage in Monaco, but I had it transported overnight to Luxembourg via private jet. Yes, you can ship a $2 million car via private jet when you have the right connections. My second call was to Thomas Wright, the former MI6 operative who now ran security for my investment firm. Thomas, I need you to dig up everything you can find on Prince Maximilian Rothenberg. And I mean everything. Financial records, personal history, business dealings, romantic entanglements, spare no expense. How deep do you want me to go, Miss Carmichael? Deep enough to find whatever my family's lawyers missed during their background checks. If there's a skeleton in his closet, I want to know where it's buried. The third call was to my personal stylist in Paris. Celeste, I need you to create a look that will stop traffic and start conversations. Think Grace Kelly meets James Bond villain. I'm attending a royal wedding uninvited, and I intend to be remembered. Within 6 hours, Celeste had couriered a custom Valentino gown to my hotel. Midnight black silk with subtle silver threading that caught the light like captured stars. The dress was elegant enough for a royal wedding, but dramatic enough to command attention. She included matching Louboutin heels, Cartier jewelry, and a clutch that cost more than most people's cars. But the outfit was just the opening act. The real show would be my entrance. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 3 p.m. at the Rothenberg family chapel, followed by a reception in the castle's grand ballroom. Security would be unprecedented. The guest list included 3 heads of state, 2 tech billionaires, and enough European nobility to fill Burke's peerage. Getting past the gate would require more than just showing up. That's where my fourth call came in, to Countess Arabella Sinclair, a British socialite I'd met at a charity auction in New York. Arabella was notorious for crashing exclusive events by sheer force of personality and impeccable connections. She also happened to be Prince Maximilian's ex-girlfriend from his Oxford days. "Anastasia, darling," she purred over the phone. "How deliciously scandalous. Of course I'll help. Max broke my heart quite thoroughly 5 years ago, so I'm hardly his biggest fan. Plus, I wasn't invited to this spectacle either, which is frankly insulting given our history." Arabella's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. She would arrive at the castle as my guest, using her connections to talk her way past security while I made my entrance in the Lamborghini. The key was timing. I needed to arrive during the ceremony when all eyes would be on the bride and groom, maximizing the impact of my dramatic entrance. At 2:45 p.m., I slipped behind the wheel of the Centenario. The engine roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder. I had practiced the drive from my hotel to the castle 3 times over the past week, timing each route to the second. The most direct path would take me past the main entrance at exactly 3:17 p.m., right when Genevieve would be saying her vows. As I drove through the Luxembourg countryside, my phone buzzed with updates from Thomas. What he had discovered about Prince Maximilian was explosive enough to end the engagement, but I was saving that ammunition for later. First, I wanted my family to see exactly who they had underestimated. The Rothenberg castle appeared ahead like something from a fairy tale. Ancient stone towers rising against the afternoon sky, surrounded by manicured gardens and a circular driveway that could accommodate 50 cars. A red carpet led from the main entrance to the chapel, lined with photographers and security personnel. I could see the wedding guests through the chapel windows, a sea of designer gowns and mourning coats. At the altar, Prince Maximilian stood in his military dress uniform, complete with ceremonial sword and royal decorations. And there was Genevieve, resplendent in a custom Dior wedding gown that had reportedly cost $150,000, her blonde hair perfectly arranged beneath a tiara that belonged to Max's grandmother. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while my father beamed with pride. They had gotten their perfect society wedding, complete with royal titles and international media coverage. It was time to remind them what they had sacrificed to get it. I downshifted the Lamborghini as I approached the main gate, the engine's roar echoing off the castle walls. The security guards looked up in surprise. This wasn't a car on their approved list. Through my windshield, I could see the wedding photographer turn toward the sound, his camera automatically tracking toward the noise. I pulled up to the security checkpoint and lowered my window. The head of security approached, his expression professional but confused. "I'm sorry, miss, but this is a private event. Do you have an invitation?" I smiled and handed him my driver's license. Anastasia Carmichael. I'm the bride's sister. I watched his face change as he recognized the name. He stepped back to consult his clipboard, then spoke into his radio. Through the chapel windows, I could see heads turning toward the commotion. The ceremony had paused. "Miss Carmichael," the security chief returned, looking uncomfortable, "I'm afraid your name isn't on the guest list." "I'm aware, but I'm family, and I have something that needs to be delivered to the bride immediately. It's regarding her fiancé's business dealings." I held up a manila envelope, Thomas's research printed and organized. The security chief hesitated, then spoke into his radio again. Through the chapel windows, I could see my mother, her face pale as she recognized my car. The chapel doors opened and my father emerged, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. He strode toward the security gate, his morning coat flapping behind him like the wings of an angry bird. "Anastasia," he hissed when he reached the car, "what in God's name do you think you're doing?" "Hello, Father. Lovely ceremony. I particularly enjoyed the part where the officiant asked if anyone had objections to the marriage." "You were not invited. Leave now." "Actually, I have some information about Prince Maximilian that I think Genevieve should know before she signs her life away." I held up the envelope again. "Did you know that your future son-in-law has been under investigation by the European Financial Crimes Commission for the past 6 months?" My father's face went white. Through the chapel windows, I could see Genevieve looking toward the disturbance, her face beginning to crack as she realized her carefully orchestrated day was about to implode. "Anastasia," my father grabbed my arm. "You're making a terrible mistake." "No, Father," I replied, gently removing his hand. "I'm preventing one." That's when Prince Maximilian himself appeared at the chapel entrance, still in his ceremonial uniform, but with his military bearing replaced by something closer to panic. He had recognized my name, and he knew exactly what information I might possess. The photographers had noticed the commotion now, their cameras swinging toward the drama unfolding at the security gate. In the distance, I could hear the whir of helicopter blades, news crews arriving for what they thought would be routine wedding coverage. I straightened my Valentino gown and picked up the manila envelope. It was time for the real show to begin. "Shall we go inside?" I asked pleasantly. "I believe the bride is waiting." Walking through those chapel doors in my midnight Valentino gown felt like stepping onto a stage where I controlled every spotlight. The 300 wedding guests turned in unison, their conversations dying mid-sentence as they took in my unexpected presence. I had crashed royal weddings before, in my imagination, but reality was far more intoxicating. Prince Maximilian stood frozen at the altar, still holding Genevieve's trembling hands. My sister's face had gone from bridal glow to sheet-white terror in the span of 30 seconds. She knew me well enough to understand that I never made empty threats, and the manila envelope in my hands represented her worst nightmare, the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the ancient stone chapel, "I apologize for the interruption, but I have information that the bride and groom need to hear before they proceed with their vows." The officiant, a silver-haired bishop who probably never dealt with a wedding crasher before, looked helplessly between me and the royal family.
In the front row, Queen Mother Rothenberg sat rigidly upright, her diamond tiara catching the light as she turned to assess this unprecedented breach of protocol. My mother finally found her voice. "Anastasia, you're embarrassing the entire family. Leave immediately." "Actually, Mother, I'm saving the family from a scandal that would make headlines for decades." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document, a classified report from the European Financial Crimes Commission. "Prince Maximilian, would you like to explain to your bride why you're currently under investigation for money laundering through your family's mining operations?" The chapel erupted in whispers. I watched color drain from Max's face as he realized the scope of what I knew. This wasn't some petty sibling revenge. I had uncovered genuine criminal activity that could destroy not just his reputation, but potentially land him in prison. "Those are lies," he said, but his voice cracked on the words. "Where did you get those documents?" "The same place I got these. Bank records showing $50 million in suspicious transfers from Rothenberg Mining to shell companies in the Cayman Islands over the past 18 months. Shall I read the account numbers aloud, or would you prefer to explain them privately?" Genevieve finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Max, what is she talking about?" But I wasn't finished. The past 10 days hadn't just been about acquiring a dramatic car and a stunning dress. Thomas Wright had delivered intelligence that revealed a pattern of deception far more elaborate than simple financial crimes. "There's more, sister dear. Did you know that your fiancé is already married?" The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. Even the photographers outside had gone quiet, sensing that something monumental was happening inside the chapel. "That's impossible," Genevieve stammered. "The marriage license, the background checks, all very official and proper for his second marriage." I continued, pulling out another document. "But Prince Maximilian never divorced his first wife, Catalina Mendoza, whom he married in a private ceremony in Mexico 3 years ago. The marriage was kept secret from the royal family, but it's completely legal and binding." Max lunged toward me, but 2 security guards intercepted him. "You're destroying everything," he shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'm revealing what you've done," I replied calmly. "Catalina is currently living in a villa in Costa Rica with your 2-year-old daughter, Esperanza. She's been receiving monthly payments of $25,000 to keep quiet about the marriage. The payments come from the same shell companies you've been using to launder mining revenue." The Queen Mother rose from her seat, her face a mask of royal fury. "Guards, arrest this woman for disrupting a royal ceremony." "I wouldn't recommend that, Your Majesty," I said, pulling out my phone, "because I've already sent copies of all of this evidence to the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and 3 European broadcasting networks. The story goes live in exactly 47 minutes unless I send a message to stop publication." This was my masterstroke. Thomas hadn't just uncovered Max's secrets, he'd helped me weaponize them. Every major financial publication in Europe would soon be running headlines about the Rothenberg family's criminal enterprises and their heir's secret family. My father pushed through the crowd of guests, his face purple with rage. "Anastasia, you have no idea what you're destroying. This marriage represents business partnerships worth hundreds of millions of dollars." "Funny you should mention that, Father." I turned to address the assembled guests, my voice projecting clearly through the chapel's acoustics. "Because I discovered something interesting about our family's sudden enthusiasm for this marriage. It turns out the Carmichael-Rothenberg union wasn't just about love. It was about covering up a massive fraud scheme."
I pulled out another set of documents, these ones bearing the Carmichael Industries letterhead. 6 months ago, our family's shipping company entered into an exclusive partnership with Rothenberg Mining to transport precious metals across international borders. What the authorities didn't know was that those shipments contained more than just legitimate mining products. Genevieve's legs gave out and she sank onto the altar steps, her $150,000 wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. "Anastasia, please stop," she whispered. But I was just getting started. The marriage was designed to create family ties that would make it legally difficult for either party to testify against the other. Max needed our shipping network to move his laundered money, and our parents needed his royal connections to legitimize their own questionable business practices. My mother stood up, her face a mixture of panic and fury. "That's enough! Security! Remove her immediately!" "I wouldn't," I said, holding up my phone again, "because if I'm arrested or forcibly removed, my assistant has instructions to release everything to the media immediately. But if everyone stays calm and listens, we might be able to resolve this quietly." The chapel had become a pressure cooker of barely contained chaos. Guests were whispering frantically, some filming with their phones despite security's efforts to stop them. In the back, I could see several people heading for the exits, probably to call their lawyers or their own business partners who might be implicated. Prince Maximilian made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Even if some of those allegations were true, which they're not, you're destroying your own family's reputation along with mine." "Actually, I'm protecting my family's reputation, because while you and my parents were planning your criminal enterprise, I was building a completely separate business empire. Meridian Capital is clean, profitable, and operates with full regulatory compliance. When the Carmichael family name gets dragged through the mud, I'll be the one left standing." That's when Genevieve finally understood the full scope of what I had accomplished. She looked up at me from the altar steps, mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect wedding day destroyed beyond repair. "You planned this," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and horror. "All of it. The car, the timing, the evidence. You've been planning this for months." "Actually, I've been planning this for years. Every time you undermined me, every achievement of mine you diminished, every opportunity you stole, I was building toward this moment. The only thing I didn't plan was you banning me from the wedding. That was the catalyst that turned years of preparation into active revenge." Thomas had done more than just uncover Max's crimes. He had traced the entire web of corruption that connected the Rothenberg mining operations to several other European noble families, all of whom were using their titles and social standing to legitimize money laundering operations. The beautiful thing about this investigation is it revealed how the old money aristocracy really works. Generations of wealth built on exploitation, maintained through strategic marriages, and protected by social connections that put you above the law. But you made one critical error. You assumed I would always be content to stay in the shadows. The Queen Mother had been whispering urgently with her security chief. Now she stood again, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of royal bloodline. "Young woman, you may have documents, but you underestimate the power of the institutions you're attacking. These allegations will disappear, your evidence will be discredited, and you will find yourself facing lawsuits that will bankrupt even your family's considerable resources." I smiled at her. The same polite smile I had perfected at 1,000 boring charity galas. "Your Majesty, I don't think you understand the situation. I'm not just some spurned sister with a grudge. I spent 5 years building relationships with tech billionaires, cryptocurrency innovators, and new money entrepreneurs who have absolutely no respect for old European aristocracy. My evidence isn't just sitting in some filing cabinet. It's backed by blockchain verification, distributed across secure servers, and protected by people who see your kind of inherited power as an outdated relic." The modern world was about to collide with centuries of aristocratic privilege, and I had positioned myself as the catalyst for that collision. My phone buzzed with the text from Thomas. Swiss authorities have frozen 3 Rothenberg accounts. Story goes live in 30 minutes unless you signal otherwise. I looked around the chapel one final time, at my sister sobbing in her ruined wedding dress, at my parents realizing their criminal conspiracy was about to be exposed, at a prince who had built his entire life on lies and hidden marriages. Now, I announced to the assembled crowd, shall we discuss terms? The word terms hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. I watched as 300 wedding guests processed what they had just witnessed, the systematic destruction of one of Europe's most powerful royal families, with evidence so damning that denial was impossible. Prince Maximilian finally broke. "What do you want?" His voice cracked like a teenager's, all royal composure abandoned. "Money, business deals, just tell me what it will take to make this disappear." "That's exactly the wrong question, Your Highness." I walked closer to the altar, my heels clicking against the ancient stone floor. "This isn't about what I want from you. This is about what you're going to do to minimize the damage to innocent people who got caught in your web of lies." Genevieve looked up from where she sat crumpled on the altar's steps. "What innocent people? You've destroyed everything. My marriage, my reputation, my future." Your marriage was built on fraud, your reputation was bought with laundered money, and your future was going to involve being accessory to international crimes. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo Thomas had sent me. This is Catalina Mendoza, Max's actual wife, with their daughter Esperanza. She's 23 years old, works as a marine biologist, and has been living in hiding for 3 years because she was afraid Max's family would have her killed if they discovered the marriage. The photo showed a beautiful young woman with dark hair holding a toddler on a beach. Both were smiling, unaware that their existence was about to become international news. "That child deserves to know her father," I continued. "Catalina deserves legal recognition as Max's wife. And the thousands of workers in the Rothenberg mines deserve to know their employer isn't stealing from their pension funds to finance European aristocrat parties." My father stepped forward, his face ashen. "Anastasia, if you expose this, you'll destroy Carmichael Industries too. Hundreds of employees will lose their jobs. Our family will lose everything." "Our family already lost everything the moment you decided to build our future on criminal enterprises." I turned to address him directly, years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you believe I was so naive that I'd never discover why our shipping manifest didn't match our cargo weights, or why we suddenly had partnerships with mining companies we'd never worked with before?" The truth was even worse than what I had revealed to the chapel. Thomas's investigation had uncovered evidence that Carmichael Industries had been facilitating money laundering for multiple criminal organizations, not just the Rothenbergs. My parents had built their recent prosperity on blood money, and they had planned to legitimize it through Genevieve's marriage to European royalty. I started investigating our family's finances 2 years ago when I noticed irregularities in our quarterly reports. Every shell company, every suspicious transfer, every forged document, I have copies of everything. The only reason I haven't already turned this evidence over to federal authorities is that I wanted to give you the chance to make this right. My mother finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What does making this right look like to you?" "Full confession to authorities, cooperation with international law enforcement, and complete restitution to everyone who was harmed by these schemes." I pulled out another document from my envelope. "I've already prepared immunity agreements for both of you, negotiated through the U.S. Attorney's Office. You'll serve minimal prison time in exchange for testifying against the larger criminal network." The chapel erupted in chaos. Several guests were openly filming now, despite security efforts to confiscate phones. I could see reporters pushing against the barriers outside, their camera lenses pressed against the stained glass windows. Queen Mother Rothenberg rose from her seat with the bearing of someone accustomed to controlling every situation through sheer force of aristocratic authority. Young lady, you seem to believe you can blackmail European royalty without consequences. You have gravely miscalculated. Have I? I smiled and pulled out my phone again. Thomas, are you there? Thomas's voice came through the speaker, clear enough for everyone to hear. Yes, Miss Carmichael, Swiss authorities have now frozen 7 Rothenberg accounts totaling approximately 800 million euros. Luxembourg police are standing by to execute arrest warrants. The Financial Times story goes live in 14 minutes. The Queen Mother's face went pale beneath her rouge. This is impossible. We have diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity doesn't cover money laundering and fraud, Your Majesty, and it certainly doesn't cover bigamy. I looked at Prince Maximilian, who had seemed to aged a decade in the past hour. Max, you have exactly 13 minutes to decide whether you want to surrender voluntarily or be arrested in front of 300 witnesses in international media. But Genevieve wasn't finished fighting. She stood up, her wedding dress torn and stained, her makeup ruined, but her eyes blazing with the same competitive fire that had driven her entire life. You want to destroy everything because you're jealous. You've always been jealous that I was prettier, more popular, more successful with men. This is just elaborate revenge because I got the prince and you got nothing. Actually, sister, I got something much better than a prince. While you were planning your fairy tale wedding, I was closing the largest tech acquisition in Silicon Valley history. Meridian Capital just purchased 3 artificial intelligence companies for a combined $2.8 billion. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. Even in a room full of millionaires and billionaires, $2.8 billion was an astronomical sum. My personal net worth as of yesterday is $1.2 billion. I don't need to marry a prince to become royalty. I bought my own kingdom. Genevieve staggered backward as if I had struck her. All her life she had defined success as marrying well, looking beautiful, and maintaining social status. The idea that her despised younger sister had not only surpassed her financially, but had done so through her own intelligence and business acumen was incomprehensible. That's impossible, she whispered. You're lying.
Forbes will confirm it in next week's Billionaires Update. I held up my phone again. Thomas, can you send me the Wall Street Journal story about the Meridian acquisition? Seconds later, my phone chimed. I held up the screen, showing a headline. Tech heiress Anastasia Carmichael closes historic $2.8 billion AI acquisition deal. The article included my photo, not the quiet family portraits where I faded into the background, but a professional shot of me in a boardroom, commanding attention and respect. My father read the headline over my shoulder, his face showing a mixture of shock and something that might have been pride. Anastasia, when did you? While you were teaching Genevieve how to marry money, you should have been paying attention to how I was making it. I turned back to address the entire chapel. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm offering everyone in this room a choice. You can continue to support criminal enterprises based on inherited titles and aristocratic privilege, or you can embrace a new economy built on innovation, transparency, and actual achievement. Prince Maximilian made his decision. I'll surrender voluntarily, he said, his voice barely audible. But I want assurance that Catalina and Esperanza will be protected. Already arranged. They're currently under protection by Costa Rican authorities and will be relocated to a secure location in the United States with new identities if necessary. I looked at my watch. Thomas, please inform Luxembourg police that Prince Maximilian will surrender at the castle gates in 10 minutes. The Queen Mother tried one last desperate gambit. This is treason against the crown. We'll have you extradited to Luxembourg to face charges. Your Majesty, Luxembourg's extradition treaty with the United States has specific exceptions for whistleblowers exposing financial crimes. I'm legally protected by 3 different international treaties. I smiled politely. Besides,
After today's revelations, I doubt the Luxembourg government will be particularly eager to defend the Rothenberg family's reputation. My phone buzzed with another message from Thomas. European Central Bank has opened formal investigation. Story goes live in 3 minutes. Last chance for anyone who wants to cooperate rather than face the full weight of international law enforcement, I announced to the room. My mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Anastasia, I'm sorry. We were desperate to maintain the family status and we made terrible choices. I'll sign whatever agreements you need. My father nodded his agreement, his shoulders sagging with defeat. The immunity deal you mentioned, does it include protection for our employees? I won't let hundreds of workers suffer for my mistakes. Already negotiated. Carmichael Industries will be restructured under new management, but all employee pensions and benefits are protected. I looked around the chapel one last time. Anyone else? The silence stretched for 30 seconds before my phone buzzed with a notification. The Financial Times story had gone live. Within minutes, every major news organization in Europe would be reporting on the collapse of the Rothenberg criminal empire and the rise of the American tech heiress who had brought them down. Well then, I said, slipping my phone back into my Cartier clutch. I believe this wedding is officially over. Walking out of that chapel felt like stepping through a portal between two different versions of my life. Behind me lay the wreckage of centuries-old aristocratic power built on lies and criminal enterprise. Ahead stretched a future where I controlled my own destiny without owing anything to family legacy or inherited privilege. The aftermath unfolded with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. Within 2 hours of the Financial Times story breaking, 17 European banking institutions had frozen accounts connected to the Rothenberg money laundering network. The Luxembourg Prime Minister issued a statement distancing his government from the royal family's criminal activities. Prince Maximilian was arrested at the castle gates exactly as planned, though he maintained his dignity by surrendering voluntarily rather than forcing a dramatic police raid. I spent the evening in my hotel suite, fielding calls from lawyers, journalists, and government officials while watching the story dominate international news channels. CNN ran a chyron reading, "American tech heiress exposes royal money laundering scheme." The BBC led with, "Billionaire sister destroys royal wedding to save family honor." Even Al Jazeera covered the story, focusing on how new money technology entrepreneurs were challenging old European power structures. The most satisfying call came from Catalina Mendoza in Costa Rica. Thomas had arranged for her to speak with me directly once the story broke, and her safety was assured. "Miss Carmichael," she said in accented but perfect English, "I cannot thank you enough. For 3 years, I have lived in fear that Maximilian's family would discover our marriage and harm Esperanza and me. Today, for the first time since our wedding, I feel free. Catalina, you and your daughter deserve so much more than hiding in fear. I've arranged for you to receive full recognition as Max's legal wife, which means Esperanza is entitled to her inheritance as her legitimate heir. You'll never have to worry about money or safety again." Through my lawyers, I had structured the legal proceedings to ensure that Catalina would receive half of Max's legitimate assets, approximately $400 million, while the criminal proceeds would be seized by authorities and used to compensate victims of the money laundering scheme. The family reckoning was more complex. My parents held to their agreement to cooperate with authorities, and their immunity deal protected them from serious prison time in exchange for providing evidence against the broader criminal network. My father called me 3 days after the wedding disaster. "Anastasia, I owe you more than an apology. You saved our family from complete destruction, even after we treated you as less important than your sister's social ambitions." "You don't owe me anything, Dad, but you do owe it to yourself to build something legitimate going forward. The immunity deal gives you a second chance. Don't waste it." Genevieve's recovery proved more challenging. The psychological impact of watching her perfect life crumble in front of 300 witnesses, combined with the realization that her despised younger sister had achieved wealth and power beyond her wildest dreams, triggered what her therapist later described as a complete identity crisis. She called me 2 weeks after the wedding, her voice hollow with exhaustion. I don't understand how you did it. All these years, I thought I was winning. I had the looks, the social connections, the perfect marriage prospects. How did you build an empire while I was planning parties? Genevieve, you were so focused on competing with me that you never developed your own actual skills or interests. You defined success as beating me, rather than achieving something meaningful for yourself. The conversation lasted 3 hours, the longest we had spoken without fighting since childhood. By the end, she was crying not from anger, but from grief for all the opportunities she had wasted trying to maintain superiority over someone she had consistently underestimated. "I want to learn," she said finally, "not to compete with you, but to become someone I can actually respect. Will you help me?" I agreed to pay for her education, a master's degree in nonprofit administration at Georgetown, where she could use her social skills for legitimate charitable work. It would take years for her to rebuild her identity around achievement rather than inherited status, but the wedding disaster had shocked her into recognizing the need for change. The broader implications of the scandal rippled through European high society for months. The investigation I had triggered ultimately exposed money laundering operations involving 12 royal families, 43 European banks, and criminal networks spanning 6 continents. The European Union passed new legislation requiring aristocratic families to undergo the same financial scrutiny as public corporations. More personally satisfying was the reaction from the business world I had conquered. 3 days after the wedding, I received a handwritten note from Warren Buffett. "Anastasia, your handling of a complex family and criminal situation showed the same strategic thinking that built your technology empire. Looking forward to our next investment discussion." The tech industry responded even more enthusiastically. Within a week, I had received partnership offers from every major Silicon Valley firm and invitations to speak at conferences around the world. My story became a case study in business schools, not just for the financial achievement, but for demonstrating how to dismantle corrupt power structures using intelligence, evidence, and modern legal frameworks. The Lamborghini had served its purpose as a dramatic entrance vehicle, but I donated it to a charity auction 6 months later. It sold for $2.7 million, with proceeds going to organizations that support victims of financial crimes like the kind I exposed. My relationship with wealth changed fundamentally after the wedding incident. Having $1.2 billion stopped being about personal luxury and became about systemic power, the ability to fund investigations, protect whistleblowers, and challenge institutions that believed themselves above accountability. I established the Meridian Foundation with an initial endowment of $200 million, focused on supporting investigative journalism and legal aid for people fighting corruption in their own families or communities. The foundation's first major case involved exposing a network of private schools that were selling admission to wealthy families while discriminating against qualified students from lower-income backgrounds. 1 year after the royal wedding disaster, I received an unexpected letter from Queen Mother Rothenberg, writing from house arrest pending her own trial for financial crimes. Her handwriting was elegant despite her circumstances. "Ms. Carmichael, I spent 70 years believing that breeding and title were the ultimate forms of power. You demonstrated that intelligence and integrity create a more durable foundation for influence than centuries of inherited privilege. I cannot forgive the destruction of my family's reputation, but I must acknowledge that your methods were more honorable than ours." The letter surprised me with its honesty. Even facing prison, she maintained enough dignity to recognize that her family's downfall had resulted from their own criminal choices, rather than my exposure of them. Prince Maximilian received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, though he would be eligible for parole in 8 years with good behavior.
His cooperation with international authorities led to the seizure of $3.2 billion in criminal proceeds and the arrest of 127 individuals involved in the money laundering network. From prison, he wrote to thank me for ensuring Catalina and Esperanza's safety and legal recognition. His final paragraph stayed with me. I spent my entire life believing that breeding and title were the ultimate forms of power, but crime made me common. You showed me that honor is earned through choices, not inherited through bloodlines. Today, 2 years after that chapel confrontation, I run Meridian Capital from a headquarters in Austin, Texas, deliberately choosing a location that represents innovation and growth over traditional power centers. My net worth has grown to $2.1 billion through continued technology investments, but more importantly, I wake up every day knowing that my wealth comes from creating value rather than exploiting systems.
The family dynamic has stabilized into something healthier than what we had before. My parents run a smaller, legitimate shipping business under federal oversight. Genevieve graduated from Georgetown and now manages a foundation that provides education funding for children from low-income families. We have dinner together once a month, not as competitors, but as people who survived a mutual crisis and learned to respect each other's different strengths. The story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of inherited power and the importance of meritocracy. But for me, it was simpler. It was about refusing to accept other people's limitations on my potential. The yellow Lamborghini was just a symbol. The real power came from years of building something genuine while everyone else was focused on maintaining something false. Sometimes people ask me if I regret destroying my sister's wedding and exposing our family's crimes. The answer is always the same. I regret that the crimes happened, but I'm proud that I found the courage to stop them. Some traditions deserve to be broken, especially when they're built on lies that hurt innocent people. The most important lesson wasn't about money or power. It was about understanding that family loyalty doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Real love sometimes requires difficult confrontations that force people to become better versions of themselves. That chapel confrontation taught me that the most effective revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. I didn't just expose my family's crimes, I created a better future for everyone involved, including the people who had tried to diminish me. 2 years later, that's the legacy I'm most proud of.